I don't know who's with us. I don't see anybody particularly up there except Gary, and that's Gary right there. Right there. He's a little invisible, but he's there in terms of that part of it. But on this throne, this is the best diagram that I could come up with. I gave you a copy of that last week, so if you have it, but we're not going over it again, but I just want you to see how the circles represent various groups of people or things that are there. And of course, we've got the 24 elders. We don't know who they are. It doesn't tell us. We believe that maybe 12 of those would be the apostles, and we're not sure who the other 12 are. But that's not of importance in terms of that. What we're seeing here and what John is showing us is a glimpse into heaven and the throne and all the people around the throne worshiping him. And we all hope we're going to be a part of that. Remember, this is a vision. This is a prelude to what we believe will be there in heaven with the throne. The throne in heaven, with all there worshiping God. John, though, in the 5th chapter, in the 6th chapter, actually, and we'll see our 5th chapter, and then we'll see how it works out. He's weeping because no one has been what?
Found worthy to open.
Right. Until the Lamb comes to the throne, and the Lamb certainly being whom? Christ slain. Even has the markings of that in terms of that. There's a question that always comes up about the question in the phrase in the 5th chapter about, and they will reign on earth. You know, there's a lot of people still out there believing that Christ will come and establish an earthly kingdom for 1,000 years. And we call that, that's premillennialism and postmillennialism. And we'll get into those later as we get into the other chapters. But the whole thing is, Scripture tells us a different account. We are told in 1 Peter that Christians are a royal priesthood, and we are already reigning here on earth with Christ in heaven. And that's the whole idea about what we're thinking about here. And it goes along with all the other scriptures in the New Testament talking about this particular reigning. I'm going to go over an overview of the seals that we're going to be talking about. So I want to hand out, I want you to get a handout if you would, please. I want an overview of the seals. And we were just talking about this last week. Was it last week, I think? Pass those out. I appreciate it. All right. And each one per family. So, but if we have some extras left over, I'll be glad to give you those that come, bring them back up here. This is what we're going into in chapter 6. Going to try to get through as much of chapter 6 today as I possibly can, because next week will be our final lesson for this year, and then we'll come back in January with the other, with the next section, which will be chapters 8 through 14. So just to let you know, hopefully you'll stay with me. We'll go through this thing and get together here. Okay, looking at these, an overview. After taking the scroll from God, the Lamb now opens it. 7 seals to reveal its contents. The opening of the first 4 seals is introduced by the 4 living creatures in turn. You can turn to chapter 6 if you'd like to. I hope you're there anyway. That's where we're going to be this week in terms of that part. So the first 4, they reveal horsemen. And the first 3 are summed up with the 4th horseman. They were given powers over 1/4 of the earth to kill by sword, famine, plague, and by wild beasts. The 5th seal, though, reveals those who have been slain because of the word of God, martyrs, in other words, that persecuted the church during that period of time. They were persecuted and killed. The 6th seal reveals the day of the Lord, which brings the Lamb's wrath to those on earth. The seventh seal, which we will not get into, is not open until the 8th chapter. All right. And so the seals, seven seals, sum up the whole human history from the viewpoint of heaven and the church. There's a war, famine, pestilence in general, and churches being persecuted. Then the end brings terror to the world. This probably accounts for the silence that we see before we go to the seventh seal. The description of the seals is similar to the signs of the end of the earth, which is described in Matthew 24, which is the account that Christ gives his discourse. Olivet discourse is where that is. Wars, famines, earthquakes, persecution, the heavenly bodies are shaken. At that time, the sign of the Son of Man will appear in the sky, and all the nations will form. Now, we know that earthquakes happen. There was just this week in California, 7.0 earthquake, right? All of these kind of things are what? Occurring every single day on this earth, somewhere there. Wars, rumors of wars. Probably saw this morning where Assad from Syria, all right, was ousted as dictator. He'd been there 22, 23 years, taking over for his father. And Damascus is mentioned very prominently in that. Well, we know I've never been to Damascus, all right, Syria, but the Bible, that's a very important city in terms of the way that it worked out in the New Testament. That's where Saul was going. And so Damascus, Syria is a very, very important city. And the overthrow of that, of course, he was a dictator. And so what's going to happen now, we don't know. But these things are going on. The seven seals describe the tribulation as largely man-made, but under the control of God. The fact that the seven seals are opened by Christ indicates his sovereignty over the future. Jesus opened seals to permit us to see the future course of history. That's the important part, which is not hidden from the saints. God has entrusted Jesus to reveal the future course of history to his church. And the testimony of Jesus is the spirit of prophecy. That gives you an overview of these seals. And I know it's a lot to take in terms of that part of it. But chapters 1 through 5 and have been fairly straightforward. There was the letters to the churches. We were able to get through those pretty good, but in all of them, all the churches had issues. And that was the whole thing you looked at here. God to Christ through the angel to John and to us shows us the various different churches and what their issues were, what their the condemnations and the recommendation or the commendations to them and the way in which they handle. But in chapter 5, it's clear that Jesus takes the throne from God. However, Christ opening the seals in chapter 6, there's a part that's where people start to struggle with Revelation as far as interpretation is concerned. Revelation is not a mythical hodgepodge or apocrypha. It's considered to be in full harmony with everything else in the New Testament. The series of judgments that you're going to see doesn't replace the what? The one judgment day that's going to occur at the second advent. All of these judgments are on earth against people on earth, and we're included in that because we are involved with it. Look at the millions and millions of people going through catastrophes every day in the various parts of the country. We seem to be what? To a certain extent, exempted. All right. I mean, it worries me. We seem to be exempted. I don't think that's going to be the end result of things that are happening. Something has got to start. I mean, we had, a major 9/11 and we've had things like that happen to us that brought us to our knees to a certain extent. We don't have the same thing every single day and week that's going on in Israel with Hamas and going on in Ukraine, going on in all of these places like that. But it's not to say that what? That it won't happen. Okay. And the question is, as God's people, how are we going to react to that? Well, we see in the final judgments, I'm jumping ahead a little bit here, We see in the final judgments of chapter 6, where people looking at how the second advent is going to occur, they want to hide, let the mountains fall on them, go into caves. They want to die. They don't want to be what? Tortured. They don't want to have all of this happen to them. They'd rather die. The scope of the seal of judgments, though, in chapter 6, affects only 1/4 of the earth. And we'll see that in verse 8. So there's control, there's restraint. The whole thing's not going to happen until when? Christ comes back. That's when the destruction is going to occur. Full destruction. The fourth of the earth and the third, and we'll talk about that when we get to them in terms of that part of it. The concluding bowl, that's actually in chapter 16, which will be a while before we get there, affects all of us on earth, all non-believers, all the created order. But chapter 6 begins with the overview of the seals, and which we have just gone over in terms of that part of it. The question arises, and we talked about this last week, as to the sequence of the seals. Gotta get to it here. This has always been an issue. When you read this, a lot of times people think that these events are happening sequentially. Many church groups, including a lot within the churches of Christ, believe the judgments unfold consecutively over a time, signifying different stages of God's wrath, ending with the final judgment. It seems reasonable to look at that way until you see how things are actually happening. I suggest that John is giving the 7 churches and us a different picture. He's giving us 7 progressively parallel events occurring during the time between the 2 comings of Christ. It's called recapitulation, a restatement or retelling of the judgments from different vantage points. As John finishes one event, which is the seals, concluding with Christ's second advent, he circles around and starts all over with the trumpets. And we'll see that in the next chapters. Again, concluding with the second advent, and then finally the bowls, which will be in chapter 16, ending with the second advent. The only difference in the way John portrays the happenings is some of the judgments are restricted, as we said. Only 1/4 and 1/3 of the earth is affected, as in the seals and trumpets, where the bowls is a more complete and devastating revelation. Now, let's see if I can clarify that a little bit for you. Hopefully, we can do that. How many of you watched football? Anybody watch football yesterday? All right. Well, I don't care whether it's college football or the NFL. If you watch football, think about this as my example of what's going on here with John. When you view a particular play on television, the game is viewed from different cameras. There are hundreds of cameras all over the stadium. Each play, when they go back and replay it, is viewed from different angles, especially when it's a controversial play, whether it be like a fumble or where the person steps out of bounds or things of that sort. And when they review it, they will show 5 or 6 different pictures, but it's what? One play. One play. It's one play. Even though it's one play, it's being replayed to us from various viewpoints, from north, south, east, west, southeast, southwest, south, northwest, whatever it might be. However many angles they have with that one play to determine what actually happened. This is the way John is portraying the seals, trumpet, and bowls to us. But here's the whole point. You can believe it's consecutive. or you can believe it's a replay of one event with all these judgments of the seals, of the trumpets, and of the bowls happening at one time. And John is going back and explaining this in different ways to the Jewish people there, to us now, as we have to try to go back and determine how this is done. But regardless of it, we end up at the same point. And what's that point? And when I say we end up there, we're visioning that, but what is it that we're visioning that's going to happen at the end? The second. That is the key. That's where it's going to happen. All of these things are occurring, and are they occurring now? The things that are going on are happening what? Concurrently. You know, whether it be the war in Ukraine, whether it be poverty in India, whether it be whatever it might be, all of these things are going on in the world around us. And I think that's the important thing to remember. And it culminates with Christ's second return. Let's take a look at some assumptions here as we go through this to interpret. The seals, trumpets, and bowls are a view of parallel judgments. That's the way I see it happening. You may see it as consecutive. Regardless, what did I say the end result is? Now, we know that each one gets worse. As we go along the way, the seals is 1/4. The trumpets is 1/3. And the final bowls is a collapse of the whole environment that we'll see in chapter 16. Stay with me now. 16 is a long ways away. Just remember, that's where it ends. Not where it ends as far as Revelation, but all of the judgments come out at that point. The millennium and the present age are one and the same. The key to unlocking the mysteries are in Jesus' Olivet Discourse in Matthew 24, where he says, refers to future events, the future destruction of Jerusalem, tribulation in Israel and other nations, and various signs of the second advent. The known fulfillment of a given passage in some event, in other words, basically these events can be past, but it does not preclude reference to a future event. So you have an earthquake here, and then another, and talks about the earthquake here in Revelation, then all of a sudden, there's earthquakes everywhere, here, there, and there. There's pestilence going on. All of these things are going on concurrently at one time. We're just seeing a very, very small portion of this from our viewpoint as we look at the NFL game, the same way. Different ways of looking at the same thing. The mention of some symbols does not mean they disappear when the next symbol comes into view. Just because there's an earthquake, and we're going to see that right off the bat here in chapter 6, doesn't mean that they're going to have that earthquake and then, okay, that's it, no more earthquakes. Not happening. The earthquakes continue to happen. The pestilence, I know I'm being redundant here, but I want to get it over to you that that's what's going on all over the world at any given time within the world. We don't see all of that. We see major fires destroying just millions of acres out in the West a lot of time. We see the conditions, we see 5 feet of snow coming into the northeast, things of that sort. People think, and we think, gosh, what if we got 5 feet of snow here in Jacksonville? What in the world would we do? We'd have to have igloos or something to get in that part of it. So these things are going on. But the landmark by which the whole prophecy can be properly understood is the second advent and the concurrent resurrection of the dead and the final judgment. That's what's going to be happening at that point in time.
Question.
Yes, ma'am.
When you say the first line, seals, trumpets, bowls are a view of parallel judgments, are you saying that the seals, trumpets, and bowls all happened at the same time, or all the
Yes.
seals happened at the same
No,
time?
they're all happening at the same time.
Okay.
Yes, that's the way I see it now. Again, if you believe it's consecutive, That's right. I don't have, I don't, it's not my quote opinion. There's a word used for that. What is it? Somebody, Mike says it every once in a while. Something about, it's his opinion. And it's because we don't know exactly that. We just know that they're what? That they're happening. John is seeing what? Look at where John is. He's called up from his earth, from where he's in the penal colony, up into heaven in some form, and he has shown this vision of all the things that are the future of what's going on, even though all of this persecution is going on right now. This is like 80, 95, somewhere around there, 60-something years following Christ's death, burial, and resurrection. All of these things are going on within the countries that they're involved with there. Look what happened this morning. I mean, Assad, as I said, taken out, or as a dictator. And guess who's coming in? A form of the Islam government, all right? Which will be much like Afghanistan. It'll be much like the way it is over there. Islamic regimes taking over dictatorships, all right? And that's what's happened. Don't want to, I hope that lays out what I'm saying there, that part of it.
Does it make a difference whether it's happening in parallel at the same time or in sequence? The outcome is the same, right?
Sure.
It follows, right?
It's just it's just happening piece by piece by piece. And I don't know what a third means and a fourth means. We're going to talk about that a little bit. But we don't know whether it's a third of the population taken out, a fourth of the population, or is it a third of the geography taken out and a fourth of the geography? I don't know the answer to that. We don't know. It just says a fourth of the earth is affected by this, and a third of the earth is affected by this. The opening of the seventh seal, in terms of the seven seals, affect the world during the age of the church. Jesus explains it, that physical life will go on. Nations are going to fight against each other. Famines are going to occur. Earthquakes will keep happening. His followers are going to be persecuted, hated, and what? Killed. We know from the vision of God that he sees these martyrs in heaven. And as we open the fifth seal, these martyrs are saying, Lord, why aren't you taking vengeance on these people that are wicked? He says, I will in a little while. That's the term he used. But a little while with God is not what we think a little while is. It's been over 2,000 years already. One day is as a what?
1,000 years.
And 1,000 years is?
That's one day.
One day. So it might be 3 days, 3,000. I don't know. I'm just throwing that out. I have no idea. The point is, we know it's coming. It's just that we're not privy to that in terms of that part. Okay, question for you. Have any of you ever asked yourself, why me, Lord? Chris Christopherson had a wonderful song. And that, why me, Lord? What did I ever do to deserve this one? That's just mine. I'm not a Chris Christopherson.
Is that Chris Christopherson or?
That's Chris Christopherson.
That's Chris Christopherson.
Yeah, that's his song. He's the one that's, yeah.
Why me, Lord? Yeah. But anyway, here's the kind of the thing that we see. Most of us face traumas in our life that cause these questions. Why do I or my spouse have cancer? Why did my spouse or child have to die? Why does God allow unbelievers to prosper while I, a faithful Christian, suffer financial problems? Why is it necessary for me to go through this suffering? These are fair questions. And people always ask it. I was just at a funeral 2 weeks ago of a very close friend of mine's wife. I knew her very well too. And he's asking me that question. Why did God take her? Why did he during this period of time? He's lost a child. He had lost a child also. Why did that take him? We all ask these questions unknowingly, but the point is, all of the problems that we all face are the unfortunate realities of the spiritual war between who? God, Christ, God slash Christ, and the devil. The devil has been given what? Control what?
He's the,
Limited control of what goes on this earth.
he's the God of.
We know that. He is the what? What's he called?
The God of this world. And so the God of this world.
He's the God of this world.
It says in First Corinthians.
And God allows him a certain amount of what?
It's like a dog on a leash. He lets him do
Yes.
his bidding, you know.
Well, that's what we're talking about here, Ed.
And Job, you know, he
But
can,
he's talking about the 1/4 and the 1/3.
but
The whole end's not going to happen until the second advent. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
the reason why we suffer the good and the bad, or it's consequences of sin.
Yes, yes.
If Adam and Eve did not eat from the forbidden fruit, they would be in harmony with God, and it would be a utopia. There would be no diseases, because
When did it start?
it started when they ate from the forbidden fruit, and they were cast out of the garden.
Exactly.
And so, as a result of sin, man has had greed and wars, and as a result of wars, you have famine, pestilence, and diseases. And the good and the bad are going to suffer, and the good and bad are going to survive. Depends on.
So we're not exempted from these kind of
No,
trauma.
we're not. So
We're not exempted from these traumatic experiences.
Christians, we don't have
Exactly.
to worry about that so much because we have a hope. This is not our land.
Satan uses these things to pull us away from whom? Pull us away from God. Very quickly, my dad had a brother, and both of them were elders in the church where I went. And Robert, my dad's brother, his wife died at 40, cancer. He was a strong Christian at that time. Immediately after that, he just owned God. He was an elder in church. Now, I don't mean that makes you better or worse or whatever, just pointing out. So people are torn. All of a sudden, a major event in a person's life occurs, a drastic major event, and they turn and say, "Why me, Lord? Why did you let this happen to me?" And then they even go to the next level of just giving up. Think about that. That's what Satan's doing to pull us away from there. How many bad things are going on in the world today? That's going on. The war in Ukraine, the Hamas issue, armed conflicts everywhere, inflation, it affects all of us. Crime affects all of us. Immigration issues, political division, hatred among various groups. Have you perceived at any time in your life so far where group X and group Y are just hate each other? It just seems to be that way now. We don't hopefully see it in a loving family like we have here at church, but it's out there. And people hate us for being the way we are. You see it in what? Legislation. You see it in all of these things that are going on right now in terms of that. You got cyber insecurity. I just got a note on my iPhone yesterday. Be careful when you text anybody from your iPhone to an Android phone. It could get hacked. I mean, I don't know I've got an iPhone. When I text somebody, I don't know for sure whether they're an iPhone or an Android. They encrypt it. That's the only way to do it is encrypted. I don't even know how to encrypt, so don't anybody tell me. I don't even know how to do that in terms of that part. But the point is, lack of economic opportunity. So many people don't have that opportunity more or do not choose to do that. How about with the church? What's going on in the church? There's a war against our faith. Do you see it? Do you feel it? Do you see it in if you watch the news, it's always something. All the Christian universities have been sued by the various administrations for their nonprofit status, things of that sort. That's not the detail I'm talking about here, but the point I'm making is that there's a war against our faith. The churches of Christ and most churches have a major declining membership. Okay. Just look at if you look at the Pew Research and see the decline in the members of the church, as far as an individual, as far as a group like us, but overall, there's a decline. And then the next question that comes to us is what I hope we're trying to do in here, in this room, discipling and our children, discipling the next generation. The next generation seems to be going further and further away from God. And they're being taught that. Yes, sir.
I don't want to argue these points. I don't want to also say that feel very discouraged. I think that we talk about these kind of things and our children feel like there is no hope. Why bother going to church?
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't like necessarily talking like that because it was just last night. I seen more players in college put verses on their arms across their face. That never used to happen when I grew up.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
So I think that every time that a generation comes around, that we are confounded by new technologies, new ways of doing things. And I'm not saying that the church hasn't suffered in some degree, but I have never seen so many community churches when I grew up. There's a lot of people that are going to religious things and searching, and I think it helped. I think that we should be the positive and encouraging voice.
I agree. Totally agree. All I'm giving you is some statistics that I'm looking at here. That's all I'm doing. And in terms of that part,
just have to be careful.
Yeah.
When we talk about those things, who are we talking about and expressing our concerns with? Because I think that we need to be encouraging. I'm keeping
you in a group here that's not in that group. In terms of that part of it. In terms of that, if I was in there in Dakota's class, I wouldn't be going through it exactly like that. Yes, sir.
Let me ask the question, why? Why is this happening? We became a Christian nation. That was what we were established with. And we became a Christian nation. And we began to take on too many indulgences, which draw us away from God and the church. And we need to be careful. I worked in the black ops, let me tell you. You can't pick up your phone, they don't listen to you. Every message that is moved. You're amazed.
The key is don't text. Don't text anybody. Don't.
No, it's not something being listened to. I've got a cousin in cybersecurity.
I think where we're deficient in our, not just us, but I mean Christians, and we don't teach people. We think we do, but not everybody's the same. We don't teach people how to share with other people. I'll give you an example what I mean. My mother, my mother.
Yes.
She shares with everybody she talks to. I go, Mama, you run people away. She goes, no, I have an obligation. She'll share with the girl at the cashier line, with the bag boy, with whoever she wants to. Okay, I don't have that. I mean, I got a gift of gab now, but I can't go talk to somebody and say, hey, let me tell you about Jesus. That ain't me. And I don't know that we teach I don't know that we teach well enough on how do you do that personally? You're different. I'm different than you. I'm different than mother. Then how do you do it?
Everybody has their different way of doing it.
And-
It takes the opportunity to do it.
So what and then I got back to, you remember the bumper stickers? Y'all are old people. I found it. Remember those bumper stickers?
Yeah.
Nobody remembers that? Oh, gosh, I'm the old guy.
WWJD
Yeah,
or?
fine.
Well, no, the bumper sticker that said, I found it.
Oh,
I don't remember that bumper sticker.
That's-
And it was, you do?
Remember, yeah.
In New York?
New York, yes.
And then somebody put,
Found it.
I never lost it.
oh, no.
Okay. And people would say, what is that?
Yeah.
And it made them come to you and say, what does I found it mean? And then you got a chance to say, let me tell you what I found. Okay. Now then
It
comes,
takes opportunity, right?
well, so here again, I'm not a great share boy, okay? But I do keep a songbook on my desk at work. Because that's a lure. It's terrible to say, but people walk in and go, why do you have a Bible on your desk? Because it's not a Bible, that's a songbook. Well, that's even weirder. Why do you have a songbook on your desk? Now I get a chance to say, let me tell you why. They asked me, but we don't teach, I don't think we teach ourselves, come up with a lure that somebody will ask you for it. I'm sorry.
Kind of like a bait and switch, right?
Well, I'm in the car business, so there you go.
Yes, ma'am.
So one thing about what you just said, so you are using one of your talents, because you're an awesome singer and leader, and you're putting that songbook out there to spark conversation, to reach others.
It's,
You are doing
it's
a way of
a,
sharing.
yeah, but not like my mama
What I
does.
wanted to say was, I know there's always been evil out there,
Yes.
always, since I messed up in the garden. I think it's just in our face because of technology now, we think it's more, but it's really not, I don't think. Now, I think the fall is that now there's no real truth.
Well, and the fact we see everything going
It's
on.
okay, and that makes it
Yeah.
worse, because there is truth. There is right and wrong.
Bill, that's feeding off what you said, I'm sitting here thinking, we're talking about the famines and the earthquakes. And, we see all that going on. And I know probably all of us at one point in time, we see all this, we hear all this, we go, God, what are you waiting on, to come back? But all this has been going on for thousands of years.
Oh, yeah.
And as she said, the technology just puts it in our face.
2 millennia, right?
We don't know how much worse it's gonna get.
2 more, exactly. Let's turn to the sixth chapter. I wanted to get into the sixth chapter today. I was giving you all this, this front end part here, and it has nothing to do with you. It's just that this is a very, very important area. So I'd like to ask somebody to read verses 6, 1 through 8, if you would. Anybody. And then everybody hold right there. Anybody?
I watched as the Lamb opened the first of the 7 seals. Excuse me. Excuse me. Then I heard one of the 4 living creatures say in a voice like thunder, "Come." So I looked, and there before me was a white horse. His rider held a bow, and he was given a crown, and he rode out as a conqueror bent on a conquest. When the Lamb opened the 2nd seal, I heard the 2nd living creature say, "Come." Then another horse came out, a fiery red one. His rider was given power to take peace from the earth and to make people kill each other. To him was given a large sword. When the Lamb opened the 3rd seal, I heard the 3rd living creature. Before me was a black horse. Its rider was holding a pair of scales in his hand. Then I heard what sounded like a voice among the 4 living creatures saying, 2 pounds of wheat for a day's wages, 6 pounds of barley for a day's wages, and do not damage the oil and the wine. When the Lamb opened the 4th seal, I heard a voice of the 4th living creature say, "Come." I looked, and there before me was a pale horse. Its rider was named Death, and Hades was following close behind him. They were given power over a fourth of the earth to kill by sword, famine and plague, and by the wild beasts of the earth.
Okay. Notice how these are open one at a time. And we have a different horseman in each one. The imagery of this 4 horsemen is not just right here in Revelation. They're in Zechariah 1, 8 through 17, and chapter 6, 1 through 8, if you want to look back at that. The colors in Revelation correspond to the character of the rider. In verses 1 through 8, one of the living creatures noted in 4:7, those creatures have been identified as cherubim, call into action the four horsemen of the apocalypse. There they are. There are disagreements as to who these riders are on these horses and the color of the horses and what they represent. That's what we'll mainly get into next week, is these horsemen. But I want you to see the white, the red, the black, and the pale. And you see on the end, the skeleton. You see these various riders depicted in hundreds and hundreds of different ways. I just picked this one for you to see how they are depicted, okay, in terms of that part of it. But these are the four major things that says about the first horse and the rider of the first seal. The first is the spirit of conquest, because it says, and I rode out as a conqueror bent on, what's conquest mean to you?
Take over.
Taking over, a conquest, all right? All right, it's, I am doing something, just like Assad was taking over today. There's a conquest there. Every time that a war is over, World War II, World War I, we and other countries, allies, had a conquest, and we took over those particular countries. The second one, war, famine, and death. However, the color white, though, I want you to keep that in mind, is usually associated with good, not evil, right? White robes, white, everything you see and you think about in heaven is going to be what color to a certain extent? White, in terms of that part. Antichrist, that's anyone denying God in Christ, brings havoc and misery in the second, third, and fourth horseman. Is it the word of God? It's consistent with the rider on the white horse in chapter 19, whose name is the word of God. The gospel is preached during the same time of war, famine, and death. Could this be valid as persecution arises because the word of God indicated by the martyrs of the fifth seal? I'm just giving you, think about this for next week. Or is it Christ? It's conquering by the power of the gospel, while the seals 2 through 4 represent various forms of persecution resulting from the proclamation. We are supposed to be out there what? Spreading the word. The word of who?
God.
The word of God. As a result of that, we are persecuted if we in fact do it the way in which the Lord asked us to. Thank you so much. We'll join back in next week. All right. Thank you very much for all your comments.
My thing.
I wish we had an hour and a half, but I know that wouldn't work.
And this is all during
Next
class.
week, are you gonna go into the scale and barley and wheat and all
Yes.
that means?
Do you have a question about it?
Because it's.
Well, I'm gonna give you a preview
Fran's got.
during that time.
She's gonna catch.
Family's going.
If I live.
You got a big yard?
Oh, I know. Wait,
Your feet is holding.
L on the back.
Keep on.
L. And here, back at the creek run.
That's the famine that's going on the way. So they work on those wages. So yeah, if you lived as a single person,
He's in my dad's
I,
house.
the other
Works from home.
3/4 of
His bedroom,
wheat,
because
you got a family.
window right there
That's
looks out over the lake, and I was looking at that.
So it's just kind of giving a reference back to that, even though this is all happening.
Yes, but it's happening today.
There's a
One
master
in a
bedroom.
time.
Somewhere used to go outside.
Starvation.
Really fight here.
Covered all over the world.
That would be a nice.
Don't think about that. 1 in 11 people.
You used to have a pool, didn't you?
So
Yes, I had dug up 2 years ago, best day of my life.
that's,
Well, days of my life.
thank you.
Another one of those.
You ain't got enough keys. That's your problem.
And then
The sad thing is, in a couple of weeks, they have another set on there.
Sarah, I think said.
We have 3 cars and we're gonna end up with 4 and then get
But
rid
the
of one of them.
runway for all the
Thank you.
big heavy equipment went back and forth, 6 weeks. So.
Not that you have a lot of heat.
There you go.
It's getting
Yes, sir.
clearer. I mean, look at the size, you could break a window with.
It's just hard to get through this because, I mean, I could run through it or something like. That's all we're doing. It's, you know, again, everybody.
It's a really good question.
There's so many different interpretations of what they see.
I think discussion helps though.
Ma'am?
I think discussion helps.
I agree.
Frustrated because you want to get through something,
not-
but
Yeah, I'm not,
But I
I'm
think-
hoping that that's not what I'm portraying here. I mean, I just want to make sure we have an understanding. It takes us 5 weeks, 6 weeks, 7 weeks, whatever it is. To know what revelation is for anybody to have an understanding, because we look back at, as I said, Zechariah and that, and we see those horses like that. So we know what the old age or the old Hebrews back in the Old Testament,
yeah.
they recognize these. But the people in the New Testament, you know, other than the Jews, didn't recognize it. The New Testament was written for Greeks, for all of us. And trying to look at this makes it more difficult unless you have a reference point.
I've got some Jewish friends that we've talked back before they know where I'm standing. And and I've actually pointed to ask, what's the problem with the Testament with y'all? With Jews? Well, that's just a very good story.
I know.
That's the way they look at it. A lot of them.
Yeah.
At San Jose, we had, I don't know who the preacher was at the time. They invited, Messianic Jewish minister to come speak. And it was fascinating.
Yeah.
And there is a congregation up on Phillips, I think still. I think it used to be on Bay Meadows, or there's 2 of them. I'm not sure. But,
I think that.
yeah, I would love to have that person's guest speaker here.
Yeah.
How are you? If you
Well,
text, non-iPhone,
Nice shirt, man.
it's green, it's green.
Mhm.
Your
Yeah.
text is green. You said you didn't know the difference when you were texting iPhones versus non.
Well, I was making just a point there that I know that, that when you, there's certain people, you get a blue message versus a green message, okay?
Yeah, I didn't. I
Yeah,
wondered,
I didn't know that.
wondered why mine came up green sometime.
yeah,
Blue.
that's, she's exactly right, exactly. But I,
Occasionally and send it to another iPhone through the messaging system. It's not native to iPhones and it'll be green.
I didn't know that.
But I think that's probably in the cyber.
So you're going all the way through Revelation, right?
gonna try to,
Good.
it may take us till middle of the year next year.
He's gonna have to retitle our books 2026.
Yeah.
Oh,
What you doing preaching heresy?
Oh, wait a minute, whoa.
So
Yes.
you said, you gave us your, let's say if, bill about,
There you go, thus saith Bill, yeah.
about everything happening at once. Lisa. You didn't tell us why you felt that way.
What's that?
You didn't tell us why you felt that way.
Well, I'll tell you why I thought that way, all right? Because they're all going on at one time.
Okay, why do you think?
There wasn't, as you've seen today, where just the ones that are in the seals is happening, and then they go away. No. And the ones in the trumpets happening, then they go away. Then the final piece is the worst destruction. All right, and then that's the end, okay? I see it going on constantly all around us at all times. That's why I look at it that way as opposed to sequential. Because sequentially almost means that if you go sequentially, then what happened first, not gonna happen anymore. And what's happened second is not gonna happen.
I've missed several of your classes. Have you
And I'm
touched?
I manage you for that.
Okay,
No, I know a lot of things going on, brother.
are we gonna get some judgments where the sea actually turns to blood and
I don't know.
everything dies?
I don't know. It says we are,
Yeah,
but that's not until the votes.
right. But they're happening,
Oh,
remember?
sure. So that's, yeah,
Where
but I'm just
I'm
saying,
going-
that's why I'm saying it's going on at all times.
Where I'm going to is,
Yeah.
once you get to the end of all the wrath of God, I'm hoping that judgment comes really fast because everything that, cleans the air is gone. All the grass, all the
Mhm.
seaweed,
Mhm.
that's all gone. So we're using it, there ain't gonna be no more oxygen,
Right. And that's when there's no more option up there. The burning up, everything.
I could see, yeah, because if the carbon dioxide goes up, it just gets hotter and hotter and hotter. But
Well, yeah, if you look at it that way, Chip, I look at it this way, that it's still in our own time, a long time away.
Well, I hear you, but this is a thus thinketh Chip,
So what?
a thus thinketh Chip.
Yeah.
I've noticed it's a lot harder to grow things than it was when I was a kid.
Oh, yeah.
Now, part of that, I think, is the regulation of fertilizers.
Yes, I think pesticides, all of these kinds of things have a definite effect on them. The way things are,
I gotta wonder, because, I mean, I've had gardens off and on since I was 12.
say that again?
I've had gardens off and on since I was 12.
Yeah,
And it used to be, all you had to do was weed.
right.
You fertilized when you planted and then you just weeded.
Been there, done that. My dad owned 40 acres and we farmed land, everything, in terms of that, mainly corn in the bigger acreages and things like that. And, but your regular gardens, yeah, you did it right first.
Yeah.
And then, I pulled awful lot of weeds.
Oh, yeah. Now, Joey used to say, how do you tell the difference between a weed and what's good? I said, you didn't plant the weed. It's that easy, Joey.
I know.
I said, the ground's only got just so much energy and the weeds are eating it.
Well, they found out about that a number of years ago, that every so many, three, you have to just let the rain come back.
Yeah.
We used to never do that. We used to be back.
Don't. Yeah, well.
Glasses still falling.
There's more to the story, but I mean, Teresa, that's Vivian getting done like that. No, you don't know what horrible things he's been through. It's a fact.
And I got a son that was raised just like his other brother and.
Sometimes I wish we were younger and would paper. He said, "You don't get the yellow office, volunteers will come to the last few weeks, that's what I'm talking about." He's in the back, as you go in, third or fourth row on the right, he comes with the young guys, also teenagers, 16, 17. Okay. The young guy with gray hair and the whole thing. He needs some male help. I'll be a volunteer for that. Figure it out.
Right. Let's get with the code on that. Let's get with the code on that. Yeah, let's see what we can do.
Yeah.
Thank you.